Oh, you can tell with this movie that D.W. Griffith did not make any of that money back after he made Intolerance. Broken Blossoms. So Broken Blossoms is the third movie that D.W. Griffith has made that this challenge is giving me. And quite honestly, guys, it's very hard to watch D.W. Griffith movies after he made one of the most racist movies ever made. And I already watched that, and I never plan to watch it ever again for good reasons. And for this one, definitely does have a different turn that Hollywood was not really focused on at the time. So I gotta say it was definitely a risk. But sorry, dude. If you make one movie and you never apologize for it, which everyone demanded that he would apologize for it, but instead he made Intolerance, and that was the downfall of his entire career. For this one, it just looked like a director that was trying to get back to where he once was. And for this movie, it definitely is different from a lot of Hollywood movies that were being made at the time. Because with a lot of movies that I've been watching so far, they had their certain style, they had glamorous sets, they had nice costumes, beautiful people. In this movie, no, it focuses on the slums, the poor areas of certain cities. You look inside buildings and you look at the design of all this stuff and you're just thinking, okay, that just looks ugly. I would not want to end up in places like this. You know, the type of place where you think you're gonna get mugged just right around the corner? Yeah, it's basically one of those movies that is set to look like that. And when it comes to abuse in this movie, there is a whole lot of abuse in this movie. So for one of the characters, I'm going to name him the Chinese man in this review because for some reason in this movie he is called the Yellow Man. I mean, it's D.W. Griffith. I mean, what do you expect at this point? But he has left his church in China to go to other cultures, other places around the world to spread his religion, Buddhism. And the movie kind of gets out of the way that is easier said than done because when he reaches this place, he is in the slum area and everyone is just treating him like crap. And I kind of really felt bad for him at a point. However, there are certain moments where they focus on his face and I'm just sitting there going, please tell me he's actually Chinese and that's not a white man in the costume and all such. I mean, it's D.W. Griffith, and those thoughts always go through my head, and it is impossible to get it out. And another character that this movie really focuses on is Lucy. Now, Lucy has got to be the best performance in this entire movie because she is heavily depressed, she is alone, and she gets physically abused by her father countless times in this movie. And her father, oh man, when you hate somebody, you absolutely hate somebody. He thinks he's at the top of the world because he's a boxer and he's also a drunk, and whenever things don't go his way, I mean, you can kind of guess where his anger gets put off at. Quite honestly, whenever they focus on him, I just think to myself, dude, can you skip over to the next scene because I don't like watching this guy. And the way that he and his daughter are living in this very small house next to the docks, it's basically one of those shots, one of those movie moments in silent pictures where they focus on one wall instead of the entire building. So you have one wall on this side, one wall on this, the door's right here, a bed's right here, table's in the center, and they have the kitchen like literally in the corner. They're living in one apartment, and it's just one of those places where you never want to end up at. And this is where one of the most heartbreaking and most infuriating moments really happen. I mean, there's her dad, he's sitting there at the table, there's only one chair there, and he's basically eating everything up, and Lucy just has to stand there and wait her turn, and it's just really hard to watch. And whenever something would just go wrong, like she accidentally spilled something or she forgot to get something for him, well, there comes the abuse, and for this movie to bring it out there, it's a little bit too much. I mean, this movie was really hard to get through. And when it comes to Lucy herself, the actress kind of portrayed her in a very different way, because not only you can tell that she is insanely sad, but also she is in pain. I mean, she is scrunched over, she could barely walk, and she cannot smile at all. She has to do this in order to make it look like she's actually smiling. And when this abuse suddenly becomes too much, she stumbles in the Chinese man's house, and that's where they first, meet each other for the first time, and that's when the movie really does pick up and start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But I gotta admit, the very first time they really meet each other, I chuckled a little bit for obvious reasons, because she stumbles into a shop and collapses in the middle of in the middle of the place. He walks in, sits on a chair, literally right next to her, and the movie is saying that he is smoking, and he's just sitting there, a little dazed and all such. And I'm thinking, dude, there is a girl passed out in the middle of your room, and you choose now to get high. Quite honestly, it looks like good stuff. Where can I find it? But anyway, that's where the movie picks up, but it didn't have to take over an hour to get there. I mean, I had to sit through an hour of depression just to finally get to this moment. And that's a little bit too much for me. And quite honestly, guys, even though I did find this movie a lot more interesting than Birth of a Nation, of course, it's still a little downgrade underneath Intolerance. And Intolerance, in my mind, had the Birth of a Nation never happened, Intolerance, I would say, would be D.W. Griffith's magnum opus. But it doesn't really change the fact that I do not like the guy, and I do not like the fact that he gives the Chinese man in this movie a really bad name. And I'm sorry, guys, I babble a lot, but that's mostly because I am really not a fan of this director. I really am not. I mean, you see one thing that he has done, and it's really hard to watch anything else that he has also made. I mean, have you ever found a director like that where you really that you like his work, and then one day he makes something that is absolutely nasty, and then suddenly you just don't like anything that he does? Well, for me personally, Birth of a Nation was the first one that I watched, so I never really liked this guy. So the challenge has made me watch a couple of his movies. Hopefully I don't have to watch most of them. And for this one has got to be the basically there's Intolerance, there's Broken Blossoms, and then way down here on the floor is the Birth of a Nation, for good reason. But quite honestly, for an hour of this movie, kind of dragged. It dragged a little bit too long in this really depressing environment. And even though I did find a lot of it to be really good scenes, it doesn't change the fact that this hour and a half long movie felt like 3 hours. So I will say Broken Blossoms is more or less mediocre of a silent picture movie. I did like the designs of this movie. I did like the so-called message of how horrible abuse is. But it doesn't change the fact that this movie is not exactly something that I would really want to watch ever again. So I gotta say, no one's gonna hate you if you skip this movie. So guys, Broken Blossoms, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Whatever you thought, comment them down below. If you have a different opinion than mine, that is perfectly okay. Also, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share my videos as much as possible so I can get monetized enough to challenge other reviewers to do the exact same challenge. And I'll see you in the next video.